wired up, aren't you? Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Oh, it's bright up here, isn't it? Welcome for the third and final keynote of PYCON UK 2025. It's really a pleasure to introduce Sheena, whom I've known for a few years now, having first met, I think, in a DjangoCon US a few years ago. But we've met several times since because she's also an African PyCon and DjangoCon organizer, so we've been involved in a number of conferences, organizing DjangoCon Africa, the first edition, 2 years ago, and we've met a couple of times since then at PyCon Namibia, so it's good to have another African conspirator here with me, and there are some in the audience too. So I'm not going to say more about Sheena because she will introduce herself, but please give her a very warm welcome.
Thank you, everybody. I will start. All right. In theory, the slides will come up. Fantastic. Okay, hello everybody. So I'm going to be talking to you about playing the long game in the age of LLMs. It's kind of confusing. Things are... Oh, is this one not working?
Oh, it was very quiet.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll stay here then. Whoa. Okay. Cool. All right. So things are pretty weird right now. Things are pretty strange, and they're strange in a lot of different confusing ways. Firstly, AI and LLMs are fairly ubiquitous. People are using them. People are talking about them. People are releasing a million different products, including them, and the signal-to-noise ratio is terrible. It's really hard to know what to listen to because there's a lot of hype, and spinning hype is good business for a lot of the people playing this game. And there's a lot of naysayers as well who really, really don't believe that this is worth looking at. And so it's tough. I like to think I'm in the middle of the hype and the naysayers. I think I've gotten to a good point, but even the people who are using these tools are still learning. We're all kind of juniors when it comes to the stuff because it's all so new. So there are emerging best practices. We don't know what's good yet. And there are emerging footguns. There are a lot of ways that the stuff is not secure. And of course, it's economically concerning as well. The job market is a rat's nest. And there's a lot of talk of bubbles. It's also environmentally concerning, so we don't know where that's going. And so it's hard to pass. And if we want to plan for the future, we need to have an idea of what the future is going to look like. And even looking as far ahead as like 5 years from now is difficult. So how do we plan for that? How should we adapt? So I'm going to give you my take on it. Hello, my name is Sheena. I started life as an electrical engineer and went into software because that's way more fun for me. And that was great, but I have always had a passion for education. So the last 6 years I've been working in tech education specifically. And that meant training people in both technical skills as well as so-called soft skills, which are actually really hard. I did a lot of work around figuring out how to teach well. So I spent a lot of time working in South Africa trying to figure out how to get people from the point where they have potential to the point where they have a career. And there's a lot that goes into that. And there's a lot of understanding of the ecosystem that goes into that. But there's also a lot of understanding of people's minds that goes into that mission. So I've spent a lot of time on that. I founded a company called Prelude, which does training. So takes everything that I've learned over the last 6 years and does the best things that I can do. So it's mostly Python related and soft skills related. Did I mention I love teaching? So I founded a community called the Guild of Educators that is all about empowering people who teach code. I'm also quite involved in the Python community. As Daniela mentioned, I'm involved in PyCon Africa, so I'm the local chair this year. Yes, I am African. I'm from South Africa. And I am, as of very recently, a board member of the Python Software Foundation. And these are my emojis. I do other things too. So why am I talking about LLMs? I mean, I'm a teacher. and a techie, but I'm not a machine learning expert and I'm not an economist. So why do I get to talk about this? Well, the thing is that it matters a lot. Like my entire jam is preparing people for the future. And so I need to care just so I can do like my job. But I also need to care because a lot of people come to me for advice, like especially in the African communities. If I go to some place where the community is young, loads of people will come talk to me, and I need to tell them things that make sense. It's like one of the reasons I really love education is because it's impactful. And sometimes you can make a small amount of effort and make a really big impact. Like you can have a couple of conversations and then a person's trajectory changes drastically, and it's beautiful and terrifying. Like it's scary, guys, because like it would be tragic for me to tell a person to prepare for a career that's not going to be there in 5 years, or tell a person not to prepare for a career that is going to be awesome in 5 years. And so it's part of my responsibility to stay informed about this and to generate opinions that are actually useful and good to listen to. So what are we doing here today? I'm going to share my thinking. It's my latest thinking. It's not necessarily entirely right. It's not the final word. I'm still figuring this out. Like, understanding this stuff is like a full-time job. But I'll share what I've done so far. And it's not just my thinking. I have some clever friends who are economists and machine learning experts that were kind enough to give me some of their time. So the way I'm going to talk about the future is, like, we're not sure which way things are going to go. There's a couple of different pathways we can go down, and one of those pathways is the hype pathway. Like, maybe there will be a super intelligent explosion, maybe the hype is right, and if we just keep throwing money at AI, we will get AGI and everything will change. Maybe the bubble bursts, maybe the opposite thing happens and everything goes away. Or maybe AI capabilities stabilize. One or some combination of this is likely to happen. So which one? To figure that out, let's look back. Let's look back at what has happened up until this point and how we got here. So I'm going to give you a very, very brief history of LLMs. I have to cherry pick because there's like so much stuff going on. So I'm just going to be talking about like major players and major models and major things. So 2018, GPT-1 happened. That was great. 2019, GPT-2 was way, way, way more powerful, and they used different techniques to make it powerful. So before GPT-2, post-training of a model was kind of like a weird niche thing, and then it became mainstream. I'll talk a bit more about post-training models in a little bit. GPT-3, again, way more powerful. So it was this rapid succession of like models that were getting more and more and more powerful. In 2020, another cool thing happened. We got RAG. So LLMs are limited in that they only know what they know, and RAG was the first thing that extended their capabilities so that they can use some kind of tooling to improve themselves. In 2021, we got some competition, and we also got LLMs that could generate code, and in 2022, the public imagination was captured by ChatGPT. So during this time, a lot of work was going into like figuring out how to make these things more powerful, and a lot of studies were being done, and these scaling laws were discovered. They're not really laws, but basically the idea is that if you feed an LLM more data when you're training it, it gets better, it's smarter. Or if you give it more parameters, if you make it a larger model, then it gets smarter. So this can be summarized as throw money at the problem, and then it'll get smarter. And there are ratios involved, and there are complexities involved, but this is the flavor of the day. And what was interesting as well is that as you throw money at the problem, as you scale things up, new capabilities emerge. It wasn't always a linear thing. Sometimes it was a step change. So like mathematical reasoning appeared at 100 billion parameters, just randomly, out of the blue. The ability to learn in context also just kind of appeared. Some capabilities showed an inverse scaling as well, so it's not completely rainbows and unicorns, but for the most part, things just seem to be getting magically better the more money you threw at the problem. Now, in 2022, there was a little bit of a plot twist. So DeepMind made an AI called Chinchilla, And it's a 70 billion parameter model trained on 1.4 trillion tokens, which is a lot of tokens. It's smaller than GPT-3. It's smaller than Gopher. But it was outperforming these while being much smaller. And it was outperforming them because it had a different ratio of data to parameters. So the scaling laws aren't so simple. Now, we could think that perhaps we could just like scale up the amount of data. We can just like feed these LLMs more data. 1.7 trillion tokens sounds like a lot, but there should be about like 500 trillion tokens on the internet. But like they're not all created equal. So quality data is hard to find, and we've picked all the low-hanging fruit already. A lot, like you've seen the internet, it's full of filth and lies. So you can't just expect it to, like there's a long tail issue. Like it's not always going to be of the same quality. All right, so 2023 rolled around. OpenAI invested more in tools and ecosystems of different functions, and that was exciting. GPT-4 was exciting, it was kind of amazing, and it was amazing enough that people started talking about general artificial intelligence. Microsoft published a paper about it, and again, it captured the public imagination. Venture capital spending jumped by 80%. OpenAI also wanted to do things responsibly, or that's the story that is told. So they started a project for making sure that their AIs were aligned with human values. So that's where post-training comes into play, and that's quite related. So when you're training a model, you basically you get it to eat the internet, right? So you train it up on a whole lot of information, and that's what it knows. Post-training is about fine-tuning its outputs to match what you want. So you get it to generate a bunch of outputs, and you can feed information back into it to say this is preferred, this is not preferred. There's a bunch of different ways to do that. So you aim for helpful, truthful, nice, harmless things, and some sycophancy. And you can also customize things for different domains. And that customization might lead to specialization as well. So one question is, where do post-training data sets come from? You can't just download them from the internet. These things are about values. It's about what we want. And it's about choosing the right facts. So it's a very human thing. In 2024, there was a plot twist. So OpenAI released a new model called O1. Now, O1 was not GPT-4 with more money thrown at it. It wasn't GPT-5, it was a new thing. It relied on a thing called chain of thought reasoning, which is an iterative reasoning process. So basically what it would do is it would come up with a lot of answers to a question, and it would evaluate those answers, and it would repeat that a couple of times, and then it would give you the best answer possible. So it was effectively scaling up thinking time, but it was scaling it up in a way that was very tied to a specific algorithm and a specific architecture. So it's not just about increasing the amount of time, it's about using that time effectively. OpenAI kept working on these things, so O3 was released a bit later on in the year, and MCP was also released in 2024. So MCP, I'm not going to go into it in detail, but the rise of tool use is quite significant. And having a standardized way to plug into different kinds of tools is significant, because this, again, is something that has captured the public imagination, and there's a lot of work going on in this space. But there's also a lot of ways that things can fall down. There are a lot of security concerns. So everybody was singing the scaling song. And then eventually, so Ilya Sutskever, he's one of the co-founders of OpenAI. And he said that the 2010s were an age of scaling, and now we're back in the age of wonder and discovery once again. Everyone is looking for the next thing. And that sounds about right. Even OpenAI, who are singing the scaling song, they are trying out these different architectures. In 2025, there was another plot twist. Guess what it was? A whale. So DeepSeek came out, and this is an open source model out of China, and it was amazing. So I know these things are a bit hard to read, and benchmarks are a whole rat's nest as well. Just understanding the benchmarks behind LLMs is a lot, but I'll just explain this. So we've got DeepSeek over here. It is in blue. That's the first model that they released. This greenish line is O1, and this is Sonnet, Claude Sonnet 3.5. And DeepSeek was performing like either was the best or was the second best model across everything. And that's kind of cool. But what's especially cool about it is it didn't really cost that much to produce. So OpenAI were busy scaling the amount of resources that they were throwing at training their models. GPT-4 cost more than $40 million to create. And DeepSeek was less than 10, maybe that's about 7 million, something like that. Of course, like, self-reported information is not as trustworthy as, as we'd like it to be. But even if it was like twice as much or 3 times as much, it's a significant thing. And they didn't have access to the same kind of hardware that OpenAI had access to. So that's a big deal. And the other big deal is how it comes up with answers. So it's a very big model. It's over 600 billion parameters, which is large. But when you ask it a question, it only uses a small section of its network to answer that question because it uses a thing called the mixture of experts approach. So basically, like, different parts of the neural network are good at different things, and so it'll use what is appropriate. And that's cool. That's a different architecture again, and it's a different algorithm again, and a completely different result. So it's not just about scale, like, clearly. O1 and O3 had different architectures. R1 had a new architecture, and yet, Sam Altman is still singing the scale song. So he said in February 2025 that the intelligence of an AI model roughly equals the log of the resources used to train and run it. Basically, he's saying that the more money you spend, the better. You'll get continuous and predictable gains over time. So that doesn't really gel with what we've seen. Now, DeepSeek made a lot of waves. It made a lot of waves technically, but it also made a lot of waves economically. So in a single day, NVIDIA dropped 17%. That's nearly $600 billion in a single day. That was a record. The biggest single day loss in US market history. Any idea who the last record holder was? Also NVIDIA. So there's a little bit of instability there, and that matters. And it wasn't only NVIDIA that struggled there. Like, a lot of people took a hit. It was a pretty crazy day, very stressful. Also in January, Stargate was announced. So Stargate is a $500 billion AI infrastructure company, and it's being funded by a couple of people, including OpenAI and Oracle. And it's very, very big. To get an idea of how big it is, it's measured in gigawatts. So 1 gigawatt can power approximately 876,000 US households. It is a 15 to 20 gigawatt installation, which is like a small nation, just a small one, in Texas, probably. And this is going to be expanded into other countries as well. So Stargate Norway was announced in July, and the idea is that you'll get all of these Stargates talking to each other. Sam Altman thinks that at some point in the future, a lot of the Earth's surface is going to be covered by data centers. I don't know if this is a good thing. One of the nice things that comes out of this is a commitment to clean energy. So in order to pull this off, you need better production, transmission, and storage. So there are going to be some useful side effects there as well. And it's not just OpenAI doing this. XAI is also gigantic. Okay, so now we're in 2025. ChatGPT 5 was released, and it was generally underwhelming. People were upset. One of the things that we have learned about it is that it requires a different prompting strategy. So its prompt was leaked. The ChatGPT 5 prompt was leaked. And you can take a look at it. There is a link which I will share later. So it requires you to interact with it differently, and it is tuned to interact in a different way. And under the hood, it's not just a model, it's a bunch of models and a router that selects the right one. And that's confusing for people because, like, you can't really choose which model it's going to be using under the hood, and so it's inconsistent. So a lot of people were upset by that. In many cases, its performance was comparable to O3, but it was focusing on doing things in a different way. So again, it's a different architecture, it's a different prompting strategy. All right, so that's where we are now. now let's look to the future. Which one of those three futures seems most likely? Things have been pretty crazy. So we've got the three possible futures, like superintelligence explosion, the bubble bursts, or AI capabilities stabilize. All right, so superintelligence explosion, what are the chances? It assumes that our current trajectory is going to lead to AI, or AGI. So it assumes that the scaling laws hold, but we're still learning things about the scaling laws. And it assumes that if you just throw more money at the problem, we'll get there. It also assumes that we've landed on the optimal architecture, an architecture that is capable of AGI. And have we? Like, we're still innovating around that, those guys. So are they really laws? Are the scaling laws really laws? They're not. There isn't really a fundamental theory about why these things work. And we also know that there are limitations to scale, for example, hardware and electricity and physical resources. But there's also hard limits in training data. So I mentioned earlier that there are over 500 billion tokens, billion? I think it should be trillion. Oh, I don't know. Tokens of data on the internet. It's not all of the same quality. We can get more, like we could transcribe all of YouTube or something like that, but all of the good sources have been tapped out that I know of. And the largest known data set around is only 18 trillion tokens. So it's like we're only really using a small slice of the stuff. And it's already very, very expensive. And then when it comes to post-training, which is necessary because we need these things to make value judgments, you need information from humans. If you're trying to train an LLM to be good at medical stuff, you probably need some medical people involved. So what are the chances? No compelling evidence that I've seen and that many people have seen, only inference. That said, like, the big players are playing a winner-takes-all game. Whoever gets there first wins the prize, and nobody really wants to use the second best but most expensive model. So it's clear that they need to keep playing this game they need to keep building the hype in order to survive. And it's also clear that we're not in the optimal state yet. So it seems unlikely. But that's just my opinion. Dario from Anthropic has a different opinion. He says that we've seen the story happen for enough times that he really believes that the probability of scaling that probably the scaling is going to continue, and that there's some magic to that we haven't really explained on a theoretical basis yet. I don't think we should be relying on magic. When talking about the scaling wall and the possibility of hitting a scaling wall, Sam Altman simply says there is no wall. Yeah. So to me it seems unlikely, probably to many of you as well. Another likely future is that the bubble bursts. So what are the chances of that? So none of these companies are profitable. In 2024, OpenAI lost $5 billion, Anthropic lost $5.3 billion. In 2025, OpenAI is on track to generate $20 billion, but they're still losing money. Like, they're getting income, but they're spending it all, plus some. And Sam Altman is very happy to continue working at a loss. On top of that, there's volatility in the market. So I told you about this before. NVIDIA lost a whole lot of money all in one go, and they lost a whole lot of money before that as well. And that's a big deal, but it's not just about NVIDIA. So if you look at the US stock market, there are 7 companies that make up quite a big chunk of it, 35%. Here they are. How many of these people have something to do with LLMs? Yeah. So NVIDIA, Microsoft, Apple, Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, and Tesla. All right. If we look a little bit deeper, the story gets a little bit worse. So NVIDIA makes up 19% of the Magnificent Seven stock value. So that's about a fifth of 35%. So they're about 7% of the US stock market. That's bananas. And if you look at where they get their money from, like 42% come from the rest of the Magnificent Seven, barring Apple. And then they get another 10% from companies like CoreWeave and Crusoe, which are LLM infrastructure companies. So 50% plus of their income comes from the LLM bubble, or the LLM hype race. Meta spends a quarter of their capital expenditure on NVIDIA chips, and Microsoft nearly half. So it's a tangled ball of string, and what if it catches fire? Like, that's, that's a lot of money. So what happens if the bubble bursts? It would mean that we can't use big financial hammers to make LLMs more powerful. It means that you can't just throw money at the problem to produce more powerful results. But existing infrastructure won't go away, and more infrastructure is being built right now. So capabilities will remain. But the tools are likely to become more expensive, maybe. Like inference on its own actually can be profitable if you forget about all of the training costs. So maybe it won't get more expensive, but it's very hard to know. One of the cool things that could happen if the bubble bursts is that there'll be a reverse brain drain. So ML experts and academics are working in these closed companies because they're being offered massive paychecks. So a lot of people who are moving out of academia in order to work for OpenAI and Anthropic and things like that. So if those companies take a hit, then that talent is released to the market. That talent is available to other organizations, and that talent can go back into academia. So there's more open research and more knowledge being introduced to all of us. So that's pretty cool. All right, so if the bubble bursts, AI capabilities will stabilize. And if the bubble doesn't burst, maybe they'll stabilize anyway. So this seems more likely to me than a superintelligence explosion. And this will happen if the bubble bursts. So let's plan for this one. This seems like the best one, or the most sensible one, in my opinion. So you might ask the question, aren't there new AI tools like every 5 minutes? We keep hearing news. So yes, there are. But a lot of the time, it's just like taking existing tools and post-training them to get them to be good at different things, or building tools into, building larger tools where LLMs are a component. So if you look at something like Claude Code, for example, it's an LLM plus a whole lot of extra wiring, a whole lot of extra engineering to make it do what it needs to do. So it's really, really hard to talk about the future of code without talking about the job market, because the job market is also weird. So we know that there have been mass layoffs in the past. And there was very, very recently a 5-year low in hiring. The job market looks like this in the US. I don't have UK stats, but things have been pretty difficult. So to understand what's been happening there was a recession, that's what this gray area is. And so after the recession, there was a bit of a dip in hiring. So this blue line here is software development job postings. When the pandemic happened, everybody needed to go remote, and everybody needed to find a way to do that. And so there was a lot of hiring. And interest rates for your businesses were at 0%. So there was a lot of free money, there was a lot of free debt. And so people went on a hiring spree and overcorrected somewhat. They overhired. Now, post-pandemic, people are correcting. So a lot of people look at the rise of LLMs and AI, and they look at the job market and think these things are related, but it's like zero interest rates make a difference. A pandemic makes a difference. A lot of this is just companies that are right-sizing. And when a company right-sizes, they're not going to fire extra people so that they can post some more jobs. So of course the job postings will be lower. Now, we hit a 5-year low, but things are actually picking up. Ooh, I said that. All right. Yeah, so things are actually picking up. So job postings are actually increasing gradually over time in like a nice, predictable way, and that's pretty cool. So I think what is going to happen here is that job postings will continue to increase at a general normal rate. There's natural attrition. People leave their jobs. People get unhappy. They leave countries. They change their family lives. That is going to happen. The next thing is that I think that vibe coding is going to give us a lot more opportunities. I don't think it's going to take away jobs. I think it's going to make a lot of jobs. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that. One reason is because this job exists. It's a thing right now. And it's causing a lot of controversy, but it makes sense. Like if you've tried vibe coding, the code's kind of a mess. And like it's okay for making proof of concepts, but you hit a ceiling. And non-technical folks are being very entrepreneurial about things and working with vibe coding, and it's unblocking doors. It's It's letting them come up with proof of concepts. But at some point, if they want this thing to be very production ready, or they want to scale it out or build in any kind of complexity, you need to go beyond the vibe and you need professionals involved. And so I'm pretty certain that vibe coding is going to build opportunities more than break them. I think it's probably going to hurt things like Bubble.io and other kinds of low coding, like lock-in heavy platforms. There's also a lot of new jobs. So we know about prompt engineers, but AI security is hard as well. It's not in any way solved. There are so many vulnerabilities, so that's a big deal. Observability becomes really, really important. Operations in general become really, really important. Cost optimization is important. So there's going to be a bunch of new jobs. So here are my predictions in summary. Model capabilities aren't going to make major jumps. If we've got a car right now, we might get a faster car with some new paint. But we're not going to turn it into a rocket ship. I don't think AGI is coming. We will have an explosion of model applications and even of models with post-training and architectures that support different things. And then we'll have certain serious problems that get owned by big players. So one of the things about post-training is that it lets a lot of people make their own models to do all sorts of different things. So if you go into Hugging Face, for example, and look for models that are good at like medical prescription stuff, there's a lot of them. I don't trust any of them. Yeah, so I think like certain big problems are going to be held by big players in the future. All right, so how do we adapt? Now, there are a couple of different audiences that I want to talk to here, different strokes. So there's early career devs. I think that they probably need the most advice, and they are in the place where it's most confusing. There are established developers and engineers, and I'm sure many people already have a good way forward. And then there's organizations. So how many devs are in the room who've got like less than a year of professional experience? Okay, all right. Okay, not a lot. Okay, well, I'm gonna give advice to you anyway, and then you can give it to someone else because people have questions. Yeah, so early career developers, they see that opportunities are scarce right now. The fact that we went through that, like the hiring spike during COVID, meant a lot of people got into software development, and then when all of the right sizing happened, a lot of people got let go, a lot of skilled people got let go of. And so, like, if an organization is hiring, they're not going to hire from the bottom rungs, they're going to hire somebody with experience. So it's going to take a while for the career to feel viable again. It's going to be hard for a while. Some jobs are being automated, and that sucks. So organizations that hire juniors often do it for like one of two reasons. So it's either to build their internal talent pipeline, or it's to get rid of some like nitty-gritty tasks that they don't want to give to more expensive engineers. Those nitty-gritty tasks are now being automated away more often, and so those jobs are going away. And the talent pool itself is just like very, very noisy. So a challenge that is coming up is that because junior developers aren't able to necessarily see where the future is going, like they hear the hype and they can't necessarily pass it, they're struggling to get work right now, a lot of people are just dropping out of tech entirely and doing something else. And so the future talent pool is going to be smaller, and if people don't get experience, it'll be smaller and it'll have less skills. So there's going to be a vacuum. Early career developers aren't even really that sure what skills to build because, again, there's so much noise and they don't know who to mimic. Like junior developers, when they want to become senior developers or mid-level developers, they'll look at what people are doing and they'll say like, oh cool, a mid-level developer knows like lots of different things. Let me do tutorials on all of these different things. And that's not really a good way to build good skills. It just adds noise. And because there's so much noise, it's really hard to get noticed. And LLMs can help or harm. I've seen a lot of harm. So the first piece of advice I'd give to junior devs is don't give up. Like I believe there will be jobs in like 5-10 years from now. It's still going to be a thing. There is likely to be a talent vacuum, so get good and get noticed. These are two separate problems and they're both pretty hard. So I've seen a bunch of anti-patterns for junior devs. The one is tutorial hell, which I've already mentioned a little bit. They do all these different tutorials just so they can like put some words on their CVs and collect a bunch of different skills, but it leads to shallow knowledge of these different things. And it leads to a portfolio of really, really tiny projects that don't really prove anything. It doesn't prove any depth of skill. If you are chasing certificates, and yeah, there's a lot I can say about certificates. I used to work for a non-profit that did training, and we had nationally recognized certification. What we'd do is we'd get people their certificates, and then we'd teach them properly. I've spoken to a bunch of grad programs as well that make sure that all their grads get like fancy cloud certification. And talking to these people as well, it's like, what do you think of certification? They're like, oh yeah, we do them because our customers like them, but what we do is we get them their certification, then we train them properly. So like chasing certificates isn't really the best thing to do. Chasing skill is the best thing to do. And it's tricky because like this place is so noisy and you're competing against people who have all of these like shiny words on their CVs and all these certificates, but it's not quite right. So the advice that I'd give is to, first of all, focus on fundamentals. They're critical now more than ever. So a lot of people getting into code think that coding, like actually typing the words, is the hard part of software development. It's not. Like that's the easy part. That's literacy. Build up literacy. I'd also say that coding katas are still a useful thing. So even though LLMs can quickly solve them for you, that's not the point of coding katas, because you could always have just quickly looked up the solution. The point of a coding kata is to build certain mental muscles. So build those up. They are helpful. Things around like problem decomposition. It matters on a small scale. It matters on a big scale too. Read. Read about best practices. Understand things like. You have access to so much information. Learn from the greats. Read books. The Pragmatic Programmer was something that affected me quite a lot in my journey. I highly recommend it for any new programmer. There is a new edition that has come out, and there's a lot of other books as well. And read code that you didn't write. The next piece of advice I'd give to junior developers is go deep on your skills by building something big. So pick a project that feels outside of your comfort zone and then build that thing. And that'll build not only technical skills, but it'll build and demonstrate mental discipline and grit and attention to detail and planning and. Like there's a lot of different like not specifically code skills that come into play when you're building something big. You'll learn about technical debt because you'll make some and you'll shoot yourself in the foot, and foot guns are great teachers. Steer clear of golden pathways. So if you are building projects based on tutorials, then you basically have somebody holding your hand as you build the thing out, and that's not what real life is like. So you want to, like, tutorials and whatnot are very useful. It's a good way to get shallow knowledge of things, but as soon as you start to get off the beaten track and do something that's unique and difficult, you learn different skills. You see where things fall short. Now, there's always a trade-off about like how much should a person use LLMs when coding. I say for juniors, like use them, it's fine, use them. You'll hit a wall. When you hit a wall, that is a trigger to learn more stuff. If you hit a wall and you can't get your thing to do what you need it to do, then it's like, don't just like keep hitting it with an LLM, go back and see what you didn't understand. So there are dangers with that. So back when I was learning to code, we had Stack Overflow and things like that when I was in university and whatnot, and that was great. And if I was building something out, I'd build for a while, then I'd get stuck, and I'd like find some stuff on the internet and put it in, and then I'd get stuck, and there was always like a certain distance between where I got stuck, and that distance was something that I could cover. Like I could fill in the gaps in my own understanding by putting in effort, because there wasn't like that much stuff that I didn't understand at any point in my progression. But now if you're using an LLM, you can build something like really fancy and gigantic and huge, and by the time you get stuck, there's like 5 years worth of learning just embedded in that one project. And that can put people into positions where they either like give up or they just don't know where to start. And so the advice to use LLMs while writing code, and then let them trigger your own learning. That's like dangerous advice, but I still think it's the right advice, but it's got caveats. So firstly, use a simple architecture. Don't try to build with all the tools up front, like do the simplest thing possible. Choose a project and like a tool. And then the next thing is build one feature at a time. Don't try to build all of the features at the same time. Like get one thing polished, get the next thing polished, get the next thing polished, because you'll hit a wall in every single one of those things, and you'll learn about the capabilities of the tools, and you'll learn about how to overcome those things. And you'll end up with something that's actually impressive instead of something that's kind of janky. And be your own vibe code cleanup specialist. Really, like there's a lot to learn from that. One of the dangers of vibe coding is that it just outputs code without really explaining the why behind it, and so the why it gets lost. So it can make a generation of cargo culters. I think all of the experienced developers here have experienced cargo culting themselves or have seen it. One of the things I really, really liked about Stack Overflow, even though it did have some toxicity in it, was that people would talk about different ways of doing things. Even if they weren't like kind about it, they'd be like, this is wrong, do it this way. And that, like seeing that strife, seeing those differences in opinions, showed that there were differences in opinions. And that was really, really helpful. And now you don't get that as much. If you ask the robot overlords what the code should look like, and it gives you an answer, and it's like, cool, always do it this way. It's like, you need to learn to challenge that stuff. And so learn to clean up after it as well. Don't just assume it's good code. The next piece of advice for junior developers, tell your friends, is to get noticed. So like there's a really big problem right now in that there's an arms race in like hiring. Developers tend to CV pad. They'll like add a whole lot of keywords into their CVs. They'll spam those CVs out to 1 million people, and they'll write really sloppy cover letters. So AI-generated cover letters where they say like mention nonsense stats like I have sold like 93.2% of. It's nonsense, and it's transparent nonsense. So avoid that. Now, this can also seem like bad advice in some circumstances, because if the people that you're competing against, if the people in the talent pool are painting themselves to look like this good, and you're like, hey, I'm over here, but I'm honest about it, you're not going to look as good as them. So you won't necessarily get noticed and get the same opportunities as the people who are dishonest. And so a lot of people just look at this and they're like, okay, I need to be noisier and shinier than everyone else. But the problem with that is that if everybody does it, it makes it riskier for organizations to hire. And if you make it risky to hire, people don't hire as much because risk is actually a cost. So like it's a messy, messy situation, and opting out of it is a tough and risky thing in itself, but it should be opted out of. So what do you do instead? You build a reputation. So things like this are super, super powerful. Showing up at community events, showing up at conferences, adding some value. Even if you're not showing up and like writing code, if you're showing up and volunteering and helping at a booth and just showing people who you are and what you value, that is a way to build that reputation. So I'm planning PyCon Africa at the moment, along with a bunch of other people, so I'm chairing it. And a lot of the folks who are involved in organizing that event are pretty young. And I've been so impressed by them. Like, I've seen their skills grow, and I've seen what they're made of. I've seen who steps up when there's a problem. I've seen who not only spots the problem, but actually says, like, I see this, I'm going to do it now. Or the people who say things like, I've got an exam on Friday, but I can do this work over the weekend. Those people are all getting recommendation letters. That's cool. In this age of automation and LLMs, I believe human interactions are going to be more and more important. It's hard to steer clear of, so lean into that. All right, established devs and engineers, so that's all of you. I'll keep it short because I think you already know what's up. LLMs do give a productivity boost. This is something that has been studied. It's about like a 15 to 20% productivity boost in brownfield-ish projects. So like if you are coding in something that's greenfield or something that's like an obvious technology, then they they can make you very, very productive. But when it comes to like legit code bases where you have complicated business logic and decisions were made 5 years ago for reasons that aren't immediately clear and there's a story behind the code, or if you're using technologies that aren't like in the common, things that aren't like, things that big LLMs like ChatGPT have not been trained on, then you're going to have a harder time. But they do work. This is something that has been studied. But be aware of your blast radius. So a lot of people are using LLMs and using things like MCP without necessarily thinking through all of the consequences. It's like, oh, it's this cool thing, Anthropic made it, that means it's hardcore, it's open source, great, but it's not secure. It's not secure by default. And so it's really, really important to be aware of the security implications, but it's also important to be aware of the fact that other people aren't aware and they'll ask you to do weird things. I was chatting to a friend of mine who works for BBD, which is a big software consultancy in South Africa. They're really, really cool. And he was talking about a client that they were talking to who shall not be named, and this was a medical organization, and they wanted to send their clients like full medical history and all of their blood tests to ChatGPT. I was like, no. So you need to be able to push back on this stuff. Validation and testing become more important. So if you're using an LLM inside a product that you're building, then it's not deterministic anymore. And so you need to have a way of checking, like, is it still working? Is it still working? Because it might not be working next week, or might not be working the same next week. Validation is also very, very necessary if you're using an LLM to generate code, of course, because it generates dodgy code sometimes. And different people have different appetites for validation. Like some people say, you need an engineer, a human engineer, to read every single line of code. Do we? Maybe not. But we do need validation. We do need some way of making sure that there are guardrails in place, that we trust the code. You don't need to read all the code to trust the code. There are other ways. Observability matters. And then the other thing that's maybe less obvious is that it's important to use tools that keep context as simple and consistent as possible. So I did a talk a while ago about the compared React to HTMX. I love HTMX so much. Talk to me about it afterwards. So like one of the examples I gave was like just like a simple button that you like, if you have a front end and you click on a button and it fetches some stuff from the back end and updates some HTML. If you were to write this in React, you have like this much convoluted code, like a big stack of like really weird code that's like this is talking to this, and then you update the state and magic. Doing the same thing in something like HTMX is like this many lines of code. It's like just a couple of attributes and it works and it's super clear. Context matters. When it comes to prompt engineering and things like that, context engineering matters more. It's a big part of the game. So if you are able to use a simple context while generating code, it'll be better code. And the other thing is like some tools have guardrails built in and some do not. So another tool that I really, really like is Django, because it's really consistent, it's well understood, everything goes in the right box, like it almost feels like configuration instead of coding sometimes because it's so consistent. And it's got security guardrails built in, so it's things like cross-site request forgery just don't happen unless you turn it on yourself, programmer. So that's cool. It's not like security problems can't happen with Django, it's just that it's pretty secure by default, and there are other tools like that as well. Last piece of advice is organizations. Now, are there like business owners here? Okay, cool. You hire developers. Okay, all right, fantastic. So because you're technical, you probably know that you should not be fooled by greenfield proof of concepts. So I've seen this happen a couple of times where an organization will have a bunch of developers, some juniors, some seniors, and the seniors are going like, nah, LLMs, that's not safe. And the juniors are a lot more excited by them and a lot more keen. And the juniors are able to quickly put together proof of concepts. And the business brains can often just get fooled by that and think that this is something that you can do on larger, more complex things. So don't do that. one of the main things to do is just to like look at the most capable engineers that you have, the people with the most scars because they've like gone through some stuff, and get them to figure out how to use the tool safely. Favor deterministic systems as much as possible. And the last thing that organizations should do is really care about future talent. So I gave a whole lot of advice to junior developers. There's advice I'd like to give to like people who can support those people as well. So if you're in a position to build a grad program or an internship program, do that. It's expensive though, and not everybody can do that. It's really expensive and it's hard because teaching is not obvious. Avoid the CV arms race. Like, try not to use automated processes to quickly scan through a bunch of automatically generated CVs. Like, try to opt out of that. This is hard because hiring is hard and it's complicated and people will spam you. The way to opt out is to look at communities and relationships. So, I don't know, like recruiter's a dirty word, right? The recruiter. It doesn't have to be. Like, I think that the spike in jobs and the spike in like vacancies did cause a spike in people who were like chasing the gold rush in different ways. You get people trying to sell you a shovel. There are recruiters who do a good job. Find them. They exist. People who are focused on specific technology stacks and know those stacks well, and people who are focused on relationships and actually know the people that they're recommending to you. These recruiters exist. I know some. You can ask me about it. And then the last thing is nurture the ecosystem. So again, things like this are so important because this is where talent comes from. Well, this and other places, but if you invest in the ecosystem, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not like you're going to be pouring some money in there and then someone else will hire the talent and you don't get anything out of it. If you invest in the ecosystem, you build a good reputation, you can build fans, and then you can hire your fans, and that's awesome. But it also just means that there's more to go around for everyone. There's more talent, there's more partners, there's more clients, there's more ideas, there's more opportunities. So, oh, I said that already. All right, so it's an investment. A while back, I was actually talking to Daniele in a call once, and Canonical, who he works for, has given a whole bunch of money to different African coding events. And I was like, hey, why is Canonical so generous with Africa? Because this is really lovely of them. Why are they doing this? Is it because Mark's an African? He was like, no, this isn't generosity. This is an investment. And like, yes, it's an investment. I like that thinking. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you so much. I don't know how much time there is for questions, but you can ask me later. Yeah.
Sorry, there should be a microphone somewhere. Thank you very much, Sheena. We do have time for a few minutes of questions, so please wave a hand and we'll get a microphone to you. There are a whole bunch up there on the left, so let's start up there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. That was a really over here. Yeah, thanks. That was a really interesting talk. I really enjoyed it. Your advice all sounded pretty good to me. It also sounded like, I wonder whether you would have given very different advice 5 years ago or something like that. Is it fair to say to some extent that the right things that were the right things to do 10 years ago are still the right things to do today?
That's a really good question, and surprising. The more things change, the more they seem to stay the same. A lot of the advice is exactly the same advice I would have given 5 years ago, with one caveat, in that when LLMs were first becoming popular, like I had no freaking idea where things were going to go, and so I was genuinely scared about giving the wrong advice, and so I was a lot more cautious then. Like now I'm a lot more sure.
Thank you. Awesome. Very. Two things. I was just wondering if you were giving that West Coast US, would you give a very different viewpoint? And secondly, how do you think regulation is going to impact the future? because safety and security, and I'm a security
Yeah.
person, so security and safety really worries me that the bubble has gone so far, and now we're trying to sort of put it back in the box again, and it's gone too far. So what's your view on that?
Okay, regulation is hard. I think that, like as far as I know, in the US, sandwiches are more heavily regulated than AI. So it's a bit of a mess, and I don't think it's easy to regulate. I don't really have a tidy answer for that. I think that a lot of the responsibility comes down to the people who are using the tools. We need to stay informed and use them effectively. It's difficult, especially it's especially difficult because even if you have an open source model with open source weights, you don't necessarily always have the training data, and so all sorts of weird things can be done. I actually took a slide out that was about Hugging Face, and if you search within Hugging Face for models to do with medical prescriptions, it's got like this massive list. And you don't know how that happened. Like, that can kill people. And it can sell medication. You have to be careful. But I don't know what regulation will do.
Thanks for the talk. Really, really great. Something I've seen the last 12 months or so is the pace of learning has really slowed at our place. How would you recommend that we talk to people about using LLMs to enhance their knowledge rather than replace it?
Thanks, yeah. So I tried to do that a bit with the talk about juniors, the section about juniors and how they can use it to show them where their knowledge gaps are. It's like you'll hit a wall, break through the wall somehow using your brain. It's different in different places. I think a lot of the confusion comes from the fact that people aren't really sure what the future of work will look like in different ways. I mean, will copywriters still be a thing? Who knows? Will graphic designers still be a thing? Who knows? What skills are even necessary? And so having an eye on the future is a big deal, but also having an eye on your own why is a big deal. So I trained a guy recently, actually probably close to a year ago, and he decided to learn Python using an LLM, and he did one of the Stanford foundational courses in 10 days. And then he came to one of my advanced Django workshops, and I was like, sure, are you sure? And I didn't think that he was going to succeed, but he's actually done really, really well. And I spoke to him about it. He's a smart guy. And I was like, what do you think actually set you up for success here? Because you clearly have metacognitive skills. You clearly have a good way of finding your own knowledge gaps and figuring out what to learn and all of that. And he was like, metacognitive skills matter. Sure, I've learned a bunch of things, but what mattered more was my why. What is my prize? What do I want to build at the end of the day? And based on that, he could direct his learning. And it wasn't always a linear thing. He didn't take the perfect path. Sometimes he would say cool, I don't need to go down that rabbit hole, throw an LLM at it, and I'll go on my merry way. And then he'd stumble and have to come back, and it was an iterative thing. And I think that's great. I think we need more of that. I think we need to test the limits of these things and see where we can complement them or how they can complement us. I think another piece of advice is that a lot of the time LLMs are used as mental shortcuts, to spend less time on a subject. It's summarize this, give me the key takeaways of that. And that's useful. I mean, it's good to speed up, but spending more time on a subject is often better if you want to really master it. If you want to build a good mental framework around something, then you want to look at it from different directions. And you want to look at it in different contexts. And LLMs are great at saying hey, what about this? How about in that situation? They can give you some they can give you some dots to connect. And that's very, very helpful. So finding ways to blow up knowledge and increase time spent on subjects is a big deal. Yeah.
Sheena, James has a question.
Yes. Hello. So great talk. There's been a general move in some areas towards agentic AI.
Yeah.
How do you see that affecting your timeline? So giving LLMs more power.
Okay. So they are getting more power, and agentic AI is very exciting because it can do all sorts of different things. But an agent is basically like a model and some clever prompting, and you can chain these up in different ways. When it comes to chaining them up in different ways, like that's an engineering problem a lot of the time. It's not. It doesn't just happen by itself. You need some tooling to make that happen. So I think that there is going to be a lot more innovation in that space. Like, how do you orchestrate these things effectively? How do you monitor them effectively? How do you handle like retries and things? I do think they are going to become more useful in software development because I'm seeing it happen. Like, I use these things when writing code, and it's sped me up drastically for certain things, not other things. So. Yeah, like the stuff I say still holds with more powerful LLMs. I do still think like fundamental knowledge and code literacy makes a lot of sense, and fundamental like problem-solving skills and engineering skills are still going to be necessary. It's going to be hard to keep up with the changes in tools. That's always going to be a thing.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more, if someone's got a quick question.
One up here.
Obviously, wonderful talk. You spoke about juniors and seniors. There's also a kind of another level of the industry leader, technologists, as opposed to business owners.
Okay.
Where do you see them setting the tone for all of these issues, security, quality, but also encouraging people to learn from LLMs? Do you see that as a different layer?
I haven't thought about that much. Could you give me an example of one such leader, or specific?
I could stretch. Let's see. Guido.
Okay, all right. Okay, Guido, I hope you're listening. Gosh. Okay. So I think having a measured response to this is really, really important. If you go too far in one direction or the other, then that's pretty bad. Like, if Guido was embracing the hype, that would be terrible. And if he was embracing if he was all like, oh no, these things are awful and useless, and that would also be bad. So I think having a measured and informed response is good. So researching is important, speaking to people about it is important. The thing is, we really are in uncharted territory. We're in a new place, we're generating knowledge. We don't know the answers for a lot of the things. And so it's a conversation that keeps on going. I think one person that I quite like to watch is Simon Williamson, so one of the creators of Django, and he experiments a lot with LLMs and with vibe coding, and he does all sorts of cool, fancy things, and his blog is great to read. If you haven't read it, check it out. But one of the things that I've seen with him over and over again is like, wow, these tools are amazing, they do this incredible thing. My 20 years of experience really helped me with this. Or like he'll add those caveats and he'll make them clear. That's like, oh, I needed to know this as well for it to work. So I don't know, sometimes it can be kind of heavy going, like reading through stuff like that, but I think that is very, very useful. So like thinking in public is a useful thing.
And I think we are at time now for the PyCon UK AGM. So I'd like to say thank you once again to Sheena for coming all this way.